Jesus understands that the timeline is now ramping down to the end of his time on earth. Jesus knows this. He knows the day that he's going to be crucified. He knows what he's got left. And this message just yells at me is that he is frustrated because he feels that he hasn't completely delivered the message that he needs to deliver. And worse than that, not only has he not completely delivered it, they're not doing anything about what it is that he's delivering. So he's getting exasperated. His tension is high. He's overreacting to things. And here is, he's going, and I try never to do this during a sermon, but I can sense that he's got his finger out and say, you Pharisee, you Sadducee, you leader, you teacher. He's pointing at people and saying, you don't get it. You're not doing it right. And people are like, whoa. At first it's like, why is he so upset? Then they're going to ask another question in just a minute. So that's the problem. It's compounded. Jesus' time is short. And he's got so much that he wants done and so little time to do it. In verse 4, it moves on a little bit. Make sure I've got the right chapter going here. In verse 4, it says, they, and we're talking about the rabbis, the Sadducees, Pharisees, they tie up heavy burdens. When they talk about the heavy burdens, they're talking about the burdens of the learnings that they have done. All the learnings of Moses. They're preaching the Moses. In verse 6, they say they have the best seats in the house. So that can be twisted a couple ways. So we're talking about the burdens that they have, and they carry these things where they're carrying the message of Moses, and they put them in little boxes, and they tie the boxes to them. They can tie it to their heads, they tie it to their backs, but they are bound by the word. They are bound by these boxes that have the scrolls in them. Or scrolls, not these scrolls, scrolls. So it is cumbersome. It's try tying a box to your head and walking around and doing stuff during the day. It's gets in your way. It's heavy. But it's a burden that they carry. And it goes back to a story I told in one of the earlier messages about the gifts that you get, the gift of grace, the fact that you can receive the gift of grace, but you can opt not to open up the present. It's the same thing here. He's talking about how heavy these burdens are and the fact that they're carrying them all the time, but he's implying that you've got the box with the message inside it tied to your head, but you're not opening up and doing anything about it. It's just there. You just carry it. You don't do anything with it. And then he says the best seats in the house. He says the number one, the best seat, is the seat, what they call the seat of Moses. So in the temple, they have the seat that's dedicated for Moses. We have some seats in the back here. And you can picture, we may have one for Jesus and one for Moses and one for the preacher. I can't figure out right now what the fourth seat is. But we might have designated seats here. And you would think that the seat of Moses is the one that's specifically for Moses. Well, the rabbi says, well, it's the seat of Moses. I teach the word of Moses. That's my seat. And they sit in the seat of Moses. And it becomes the best seat in the house. But then secondary is that there's privilege within the peoples at the temple, at the synagogue, where there are some seats that are better because they're nice up front and you can make sure that you hear everything the pastor said, or they're the most comfortable one that's got the best padding in it, which in this church I guess is in the back. But then there's other seats that might not be quite as good. The one that sits in back of the support beam, so the one that's over on the side next to the window that has a cool draft in it. You know, there's inferior seats as well, and people of privilege, depending on how they're going to measure it, get the best seats in the house. And it has nothing to do with what they know or what they study, what they learn, and how good they are as a Christian, or as a Jew at that time. But they feel that they have earned the best seat in the house. So he's sitting there going, there's a hypocrisy there because you sit in a place that you think you've earned, but you're doing nothing about it. Look at me, I'm sitting in front, but I don't do anything for the people. And we're going to continue with that because the next one on this slide is, who is at fault? And then from a personal standpoint, there's where the challenge is. This is one of the only times that I give a message, and I'm giving you the challenge at the beginning instead of the end of the message. And the challenge is, who's at fault? Who is it that reads and studies and says good things, but then turns around and doesn't do anything about it? You don't have to feel guilty about that because I know I'm one of those people. I will tell you something strong, full conviction, and then a week later, I'm doing something that is contradictory to the message. It happens to all of us. That's what separates us as humans from the perfection of the God-child Jesus. But who is at fault? Right now, Jesus is upset with the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees. He's pointing out specific people. But for us, a personal message, since none of us, in my opinion, are Sadducees or Pharisees, how does this apply to us? Because sometimes we practice what we preach, and sometimes we don't practice what we preach. So we're going to move all the way to verse 13. We're going to go to 13:31, and it's the woes. And there are 7 woes. I've only got 6 up there on the screen. The first one, woe to you that shut the door. We can take this right to here and now, and we have a church, and we can either physically or emotionally shut the door to prevent people from coming in. There are churches that do that. They will physically shut the door and say, no. You people aren't allowed. And it could be something simple as you are not paid up in your tithings. You have not attended 49 of the last 52 weeks. There's some stipulation that says you're not welcome here until you figure out a way to get back into our good graces. It could be kind of emotionally. We go back not that many generations where we said, we pointed at Bel Air, and I giggle a lot about Bel Air. Bel Air has a Methodist church on one corner of the intersection, and on the opposite corner is a black United Methodist church. So they've got the white church and the black church, where you could step out of church, assuming there's no traffic that morning, and in about 10 steps be at the other church. That's how close they are, the front doors. But it was a black church and a white church. So both churches said they were open, but they weren't open to the peoples of the other color. So that's not that long ago that they were that level of discrimination. Now both doors are open to both races, but it's still a 95%, 5% for each one of the churches. So there's kind of a feeling of rejection. So they shut the door. They shut the door and prevent those that might be in need of getting the message that they're delivering. The second woe is woe to those that will win a convert and then turn them to sin. I work very hard at bringing someone to Christ, but then either allow or persuade or suggest in such a way that that person reverts back to the ways that they were before their conversion. No, that's not your phone. Don't worry about it. It's in the back. That you convert someone and bring them to Christ, but then allow them to go back to another situation. And that one is that it's all in the... Yeah, I think it was... Oh, it was here? Oh, I thought it was in the back. It's all right. We didn't hear it either. So in that one, it's what do we do with our peoples after? I've worked with Fourth Day organizations. There's one specifically for people with addiction. And I'll work with them all weekend, and then the next thing you know, in the worst case situation, the next thing you know is that there's nothing that I've done for a follow-up after the weekend is concluded to make sure they are maintaining a proper lifestyle. And I do that, and it isn't just people with that kind of an issue. I have done the same thing with the kids. We do the same thing with the youth program, where at the end of the weekend, I'll go 6 months and never call the kid up and say, hey, how you doing? How's your walk? Woe be to the one to compare the oaths of the altar to the oaths of the gift. That one is not as heavy as it sounds. They want you to swear a commitment, provide an oath of commitment and pledge in accordance with those things relating to the altar, to the sacrifice that is given. And that's a simple way that we want to live that way, but they're saying that now you're comparing it to the oaths of the gift was that she gave $100 along with that pledge, and she only gave $10 along with that pledge. So now you're starting to rate the oaths and the commitments in accordance with what they have done, as opposed to who they are, and how we're all supposed to act and react. And woe to you that tithe, but don't show any mercy and faithfulness. We all know that according to the Bible that we're supposed to give our first fruits. But there are those that give their first fruits and then walk away and say, oh, I'm done. I gave my first fruits, that's it. I'm out of here, see you in a week. I had a gentleman where we were doing an expansion on a church. And the expansion was moving along, but there were people that were asking, why are we doing this? And there were two groups of people. One group of people that showed up for church, at the church service, came in, sat in the pew, went through the church service, and then left. And we're saying the expansion is for all the things that don't happen in the sanctuary, primarily Sunday school, stuff for the kids. And they said, well, why do we need that? And they said, there's hardly any kids in the sanctuary. So we took 2, 3 at a time people and said, come on, church service is started, let's go for a shore walk. You'll be back up in time to hear the choir sing. And we go down, and there were 15, I think there were 15 Sunday schools down there with 30 kids in each one of the Sunday schools. And these persons didn't realize what was going on in the basement of the church that they were attending. Here's one that they were diligent about their church going, diligent about their church giving, but clueless as what the rest of the needs of the church were. There's another gentleman that when they were doing it, something else was going on, and they're asking for support for, and he specifically said to me, how much will it cost me for you to get off my back so I can come here and listen to the choir sing? All right, so this is the bad part of the story. That was the good part of the story. The bad part of the story is that I looked him in the face and I said, $10,000. And he wrote out a check for $10,000. So the reason that was bad was I should ask for $20,000, I think. But I didn't. But that, my whole attitude changed. I was saying, wow, here's a person that comes to church to listen to choir. That's not a bad thing. But that was all. And then thought that donating the money would clear them of all further commitments. You clean the outside, but you drink the garbage within. Woe to you that clean the outside and drink the garbage within. This is a person who wants to look good and act good, but inside they're going home to something that's not all that clean. Is that what you look like isn't necessarily who you are. And then 6 was, you were like whitewashed tombs. This is the same thing, with the variation being back at that time, is that it was wrong for you to go to the inside the cemetery because you were coming in contact with things that are unclean, especially within that first week after their death. And so in order to avoid the contact and the interface, what they would do is they would whitewash the tombs so that they would sparkle so that people would see them and pay attention to them and look at them as they walk by. Not necessarily go in and support, help, pray for.